of that task force, which also has representations from the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Ministry of Social Services, and I neglected to add the Minister Miles LaRoda, who is also a minister on that task force, officials from the Ministry of Education and Social Services, and the Bahamas Department of Corrections. This aligns with the government's five-pillar crime policy that was announced. And I'll remind you that that policy is based on five pillars. Firstly, prevention, then policing, then prosecution, punishment, and finally, rehabilitation. The Clear Hold Bill, which I will come to shortly, focuses on policing and also in the latter stages, prevention. But might I just report that the Ministry of National Security and its agencies in its prevention efforts continue to press the HYPE initiative to intervene with youth at risk in the primary schools. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force continues its Rangers program that is spread across these islands. The Royal Bahamas Police Force continues its cadet program that is spread across these islands. The Ministry of Youth and the police have second chance programs, and the ministry has recently had a soft opening of the Nassau Village Community Center that we hope will begin to host the Ministry of Social Services Empowerment Hour next week. And the Member of Parliament for that area who was instrumental in that effort, Parliamentary Secretary Jamal Strawn, joins us today. But more importantly, the ministry initiated a very simple program by way of ads and announcements, and you may have seen it. It's the Crime Free Looks Like Me initiative. And we presented a number of persons who we have made videos of to reflect what you can do in crime prevention. Notably, you may recall Coach Kevin Johnson, who works in basketball with C.I. Gibson and young men all over this island, Andy and Nancy Knowles with the Let's Swim Bahamas initiative, teaching a vital skill of swimming to primary schools with the aid of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the National Youth Guard. Crime Free Looks Like Me is a very simple proposition. We challenge persons to be able to do a very simple video to show what you are doing in this effort. This is an all of government, all of society effort. It is not enough to talk about what the police are or are not doing, what the church is or is not doing, what the government is or is not doing. In this effort, there are basically three types of persons. There are persons who are part of the problem. There are persons who are part of the solution. And then there are persons who are voyeurs, who just simply sit and watch. Bahamas, you have to determine which of those groups you will be a part of. The Clear Hold Bill strategy is a policing effort that was launched in Angliston. It is one of the more aggressive police interventions under our five-pillar approaches, and already we are seeing real results. This initiative relies heavily on the hard work of the men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, but as I said, it must go beyond policing. Clear Hold Bill is about restoring communities to what they once were, groups of families, friends, neighbors living lives of quiet enjoyment. This approach has been adopted in several countries, so we're not claiming to have invented the wheel. We are deeply encouraged by the progress made in Angliston over the past short months. As indicated in the name, this strategy involved 3 phases. The clear phase focused on removing criminal elements. The hold phase ensured that law enforcement presence was sustained. And now, as we enter the build phase in Angliston, we're investing in long-term solutions like education, skills training, economic opportunity, and youth empowerment. Minister Hannah Martin, along with the Commissioner of Police, will speak shortly about the details. Since the launch of Clear Hold Bill, crime in Angliston has decreased. It has not disappeared, but it has decreased significantly. However, as we saw in the tragic murder of the young man still in his teens in that constituency just a few days ago, there's still more work to be done. Every life is precious. And as I've said since I assumed this chair, I do not count murders because one murder is one too many. My heartfelt condolences goes out to the families and loved ones of the victims, as well as the community of Montel Heights, which is a part of the Angliston constituency. Hopefully the work that is being done means that other families and loved ones will not be grieving a tragic loss. We cannot let up in our commitment to the whole of government and whole of society approach which is needed to bring about the change that we so desperately need. We've learned much in Angliston. From the various town halls and surveys, residents have been loud and clear in articulating their hopes and needs for themselves and their community. As you will hear shortly, our efforts in the build phase of this initiative are well underway. While this continues, we are now ready to expand to other communities. And so today, we are happy to announce that the next community to be a beneficiary of this initiative will be the Nassau Village community, represented by Palsec Jamal Strawn, and the Carmichael community, represented by Minister Keith Bell. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, in their usual fashion, began the work well ahead of this announcement, and they're already making good progress in the clear phase. Nationally, while overall crime figures are down, we know that the levels of violent crime are still too high. I was talking with the Commissioner of Police before we began. I will turn 57 on Saturday. That used to be old to me when I was younger. That's not very old. But when I was a boy, it was not like this. And that is only 4 decades ago. And so this must take a whole of society effort, because we got here together, and we will only get from here together. But it also requires cross-border collaboration. That is why we're actively leveraging our regional ties to generate unique solutions to our common problem. Just last week, the Prime Minister attended the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting in Barbados, where regional leaders came together to share strategies for dealing with crime and violence, challenges that we all face in this region. An important part of our holistic crime prevention approach is youth empowerment. The National Youth Guard program is one way in which we're actively giving young Bahamians the tools they need to achieve their goals. The program goes beyond providing disaster preparedness. It also focuses on job-ready skills and connects young people with opportunities for employment. I'm proud to say that our National Youth Guard played a significant role in the Clear Hold Build initiative. And as you would have heard earlier, they also participate in the Let's Swim Bahamas initiative. They participated and they will continue to be utilized as they show their national pride. In conducting surveys and engaging directly with the residents of Angliston, real feedback was gathered that continued to inform our approach in addressing the community's needs. We are thankful for the active participation of all of the constituents in the Angliston community who were eager to participate and improve their local circumstance. It bodes well for the future. As a part of our whole of government approach to reducing crime, we will continue to increase and intensify the tools we use to disrupt and eliminate criminal activity. We will continue, Commissioner, to permit the Royal Bahamas Police Force to improve its manpower levels. The police are currently looking to recruit a squad of 100 young people, which will maximize the training capacity in both New Providence and Grand Bahama simultaneously, such is the manpower deficit. And I would digress shortly to say this very quickly and hopefully uncontroversially. While we retain officers of the rank of corporal and sergeant who retire beginning if they are recruited at the age of 18, they begin to retire at 43 to 55. We are also aggressively recruiting young persons. I would not in this forum disclose what is the manpower deficit that the Royal Bahamas Police Force faces for obvious reasons. I would only say that the failure to aggressively recruit between 2017 and 2021 has us in a position that's less than ideal. We will, Commissioner, continue to arm the Royal Bahamas Police Force with the technology that it requires and the other resources that it requires. While we do that, though, for far too long, crimes against the environment have gone unchecked. These include activities such as illegal excavation, unauthorized coal burning, poaching, and other environmental crimes. While our focus tends to be on crimes against the persons for obvious reasons, it is critically important that we take crimes against our environment more seriously. While this burden had usually fallen on the Royal Bahamas Police Force as an issue of priority, clearly they will prioritize offenses against the person. Mindful of this government being determined to enforce laws against environmental crime, we have created the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network Steering Group that is headed by Commander Desiree Cornet of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And this will lead the charge against violators who will now face serious consequences for their actions. This group will hopefully be regularized by legislation within this legislative year. Currently, it is made up of seconded members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and other agencies. As an example of some of the good works of this group, they have actively engaged in training, and they have actively assisted the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, the Ministry of the Environment and its forestry sections, and the Ministry of Works in enforcing excavation permits or the ability not to be excavating. As we build our communities, we must be certain that we engender a culture of law-abiding citizens. That is the only way that we will continue to enjoy all that God has given us in this country. This administration stands firm in its commitment to crime reduction, community involvement, and national security. We are, in fact, seeing progress, and in partnership with the various communities, we will continue our efforts. We will continue to expand Clear Hold Build, and we will continue to invest in our young people and hold criminals accountable. And we will continue to restore communities. Before I conclude, let me just give you one example of something that is very encouraging. We all saw two young men harassing another young man who seemed to be special needs. Many persons forwarded that video to me. By the time that I forwarded it to the Commissioner of Police, she was able to report that the mother of the two young men, having seen the video, brought her children to the police. And the police were able to set the mothers and the boys down and to solve that issue. The point that I make is very simple. That was a mother who took responsibility and acted when she saw the default of her two sons. As I started, the video in Cooper's Terrace, those are somebody's children. The video at Dunmore Street and West Street, those are somebody's children. And the only question is whether those mothers will have the same courage and love for their sons as the mother of those two young boys. That is what we face, Bahamas. We've gotten here in about 5 decades together. We will only get from here together. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to welcome to the podium the Minister of Education and Angliston MP, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, with an update on the progress of Clear Hold Build in her community.
Good morning. I wish to, of course, recognize my cabinet colleagues, the Commissioner of Police, law enforcement officers, members of the media, all those who are watching, and in particular, the good people of Angliston. As the Minister of National Security has alluded or indicated, we are here because in this great nation of ours, we witness levels of violence which are unacceptable, very disturbing, and creating tremendous grief throughout this nation. We see this as a phenomenon even in the region, where even other countries, the challenges seem even greater. I had the opportunity to share with some colleagues on the other side of the floor that even in a time of curfew, when you lock down, you can't move, we had almost 80 murders in 1 year. This whole project that we speak about is to deal with this dilemma that we face as a people, this issue of violence, physical violence, sexual violence, verbal violence. And it became clear to us as a government that we had to understand what is it that is fueling what we are seeing in this nation, and to start from the premise we're not going to accept it. And how do we attack it at the root cause? Yes, you have policing, yes, you have this, that, and the next thing. We're still facing this sustained dilemma. And the question is, what is the root causes? What are the root causes of what we face? And so what you hear described and what you are hearing today is an effort by the state, by this government, to attack on all fronts issues that we believe feed into or impact issues of violence in this country. And they started in Engliston, which is a good place to start because I appreciate the focus and the concentration of resources. But the approach has been threefold: environmental, infrastructural, and one of human development. On the issue of the environment, the minister spoke about issues such as poaching, etc. But in communities like Engliston, you also have the issue of roadside garages, which use chemicals, which are being spent or exhaled into people's homes where they have children. It deals with issues of abandoned homes where people gather next door to your house. It deals with issues like abandoned or derelict vehicles, which house rodents in the thousands. And it also deals with overgrown properties, which also provide undisclosed concerns. And so on the issue of the environment in Engliston, a lot of approaches were made. One was that many of the overgrown lots have been brought down. And what we did to avoid, and we're not trying to take anyone's property, but you can't have your property in a community and just leave it there. You have a responsibility. And the state took on the responsibility where that was not, where the individual responsibility was not present. Lots were brought down. And what we decided to do was to plant fruit trees. We did this in Montelites. We're going to extend it into other areas. But someone just sent me a video, and a neighbor who lives near the area, and he said the trees are growing nicely. And they're citrus fruit trees, which will be available for the community. The other thing that was done is, I think the numbers here, well, they say hundreds of derelict vehicles were moved. And that has helped the issue of rodents. And I've been in touch with the Minister of the Environment to assist us with other measures to deal with rodents. The other issue that we addressed was the infrastructural issue. So in the environment, across the board, we sought to remove all of these hazards that are proximate to where people live. And then the other approach was the infrastructural issue. And in that regard, we worked with BPL, Ministry of Works, to put in place lighting. And in one particular area, it was sort of surprising because it's an area where we have had a lot of issues, and there was no lighting in that area. And so we've been able to put in place lighting in areas to minimize any risks, but also it's a work in progress. We have a long way to go. We're also working on redeveloping our parks. We've just recently paved the Ridgeland Park, East Park, where the Engliston Park is a work in progress, and we're going to do some additional work there. And we're hoping that where in a Ridgeland Park West, for example, there is no park, there is no green space. And when you look at the research about the impact of the environment on social development and a deteriorated environment, which is what we're seeing in a lot of these communities, that the way in which it impacts the psyche of a community. And so in Ridgeland Park West, where there is no park, no green space, and where there have been a lot of challenges, we are speaking with the Office of the Prime Minister, Lands and Surveys, with a view to procuring a space that will provide a place for the community, for children to go, etc. These things seem isolated, But communities are supposed to be living organisms. And when it becomes a deteriorated, reduced space, it seriously impacts the psyche of everyone, and in particular young people. On the issue of human development, the minister spoke about hype in the schools, and I could speak at length of what we're doing in the Ministry of Education. I'm going to narrow it to Angliston. But we understand that we have to intervene in many ways with our children. The hype is an example of that project. And then the youth programs in play, urban renewal, the bands, etc. And let me just make sure I haven't missed BTVI. BTVI is committed to working with young people who have finished school, didn't finish school, whatever the issue is, and to provide pathways for them. And they are ready, willing, and able. They have a number of programs, but they want to craft something specifically for the work that we're doing in this whole initiative to address crime and violence. And so it's now, I'm told it's now, but so Angliston needs lots more. I will be lobbying and working on that. It's moving to another area, but I can assure you that we are still alive and well. I should mention that some training programs took place with the pastors. They've been very pivotal in this work, the church, which are everywhere. And I'm told that there are 50 pastors were trained in conflict resolution. And we all know that the church can be a central institution if it reconceives its role in a community. And this was a reconception of its role in conflict resolution. And the goal was to equip community leaders to de-escalate disputes before they turn violent, and initiate aims to reduce reliance on police intervention for minor conflicts. And then I just want to say that a survey was done of over 500 respondents who live in the area. And it was interesting that almost everyone knew someone who was murdered. Lord have mercy. It's sad. And then they identify, and that's not isolated to Angliston. I believe everyone in this room knows someone who was murdered. They say that they had concerns about domestic violence, youth conflicts, child neglect. And trust in the police and the community was mixed, but it did show that there is a reliance on the police in a time of crisis to bring resolution. So in closing, it's now moving to Nassau Village and the Carmichael constituencies. And the work, I'm told, has already begun. I saw the photographs aggressively already in those two communities. So I just want to conclude by saying that this is something that we have to look at ourselves with honest eyes to find solutions to shift these sorts of trends that we're seeing, to enhance quality of life for our people, and to eliminate concepts of ghetto and things of that nature, and understand that wherever people gather and have their homes, you have communities, and especially if you got children, and that it's the obligation of all of us to ensure that those are healthy, thriving places, to the extent the obligation lies with policymakers and other stakeholders. And so I just want to thank everyone who was able to contribute to the work that is away. The commissioner is coming now. She will speak about impact. And the building phase will continue with great intensity and aggression. And I just want to say in that regard, the Minister of Housing is here, and I know he forget, but I want to remind him. He said, with those cleared lots, we're going to have housing, and which is good, because housing communities, like his subdivisions, a lot of people are pulled out of communities and they go there. Nothing wrong with that. But where you begin to engender community by building homes and keeping sustained relationships and some sort of sustainability, and not just coming in and out, all of these things in your to stronger communities. So he's here, and I really look forward to having a conversation with him very shortly about how we can provide affordable housing in the great community of Engliston. Thank you so much.
All right, moving to our next speaker now, I'd like to present the Commissioner of Police, Ms. Shanta Knowles, with her report.
A very pleasant good morning. I would like to thank the Minister of National Security for allowing me to be on this platform with him this morning and to share the work of the Royal Bahamas Police Force in this Clear Hold and Build initiative that is now alive and well in our communities here in New Providence. I would also like to thank the officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force who remain committed to community development, who remain committed to ensuring that the fear of crime is reduced in all communities across the Bahamas. Since assuming the office of Commissioner of Police, I have seen firsthand the dedication of all of the officers, and I am pleased with the progress that we are making as an organization in rebuilding trust with the communities in the Bahamas. And I say thank you to each and every one of them. As the Minister has said, the Royal Bahamas Police Force takes the lead role in the Clear Hold and Build initiative. This initiative, which began on the 7th of October last year, and our survey up to the 16th of February of this year, shows that the crime in this particular area, the Angliston area, was one of concern for us. Of course, it has always been a concern for us, but certainly a clear and in a very good place for us to start this project. The challenges that we saw in the Angliston area, of course, not immune to only Angliston, but to other areas. But as this was the first area that we began in, we saw that gang violence and shootings were a major concern in this particular area. I do believe that there is something playing on the screen today behind you. Of course, I can't see it, so you get to see firsthand what I'm trying to bring across to you. Some of the incidents that we saw were shootings, murders, and of course, gunshot reports. The numbers that we have gotten last year for that period from January 1 to October 16th showed us that we had 8 murders and 3 shootings in that area, and that there were 50 gunshot reports after this initiative took place from the 7th of October until the 16th of February this year. We saw a major decrease in those crimes. 3 murders occurred in the Angliston area and 0 shootings. Gunshot reports were 50, and they're now down to 20. And so it tells us that the program is certainly working for us in this community. Our stats, of course, as you can see, show a decline in these major crimes that have been reported. So the impact of this with the community, it tells us that partnership is very important. We are in partnership with other government agencies, but it is important for us to be partners with members of the community, and that is what we have been building over the past 2-3 months. And we see the importance of that partnership because we are able now to reach even more people in the communities. The new communities that we will be targeting are the Carmichael community and the Nassau Village community. What we have seen in the Carmichael community were 4 murders, and this is for both communities. 4 murders reported, 4 shootings, and of course in Nassau Village there were 86 gunshot reports. These were detected by our spot shotter technology and also reported by members of the community, and we thank them for always partnering with us and sharing information with us so that we can act on it. And then in the Carmichael community, 4 murders, 4 shootings, and 94 gunshot reports, again detected by spot shotter technology and the community. Over the past weekend, we held an Operation Resolute. We saw the success of that operation, which was tailored towards the entire New Providence for the weekend. As the minister has announced, the project has already begun in Nassau Village and Carmichael, where we've been executing warrants, where we have been stopping vehicles that we suspect are carrying illegal contrabands and weapons. We've been issuing fixed penalty notices to those persons who are in contravention of the traffic laws. And so we are pleased with what we have seen on the weekend, the efforts of the police, and we do believe that as we continue in these communities, we will see a reduction in crime, especially crimes against the person. As we move forward with this initiative, we will continue to execute search warrants on places our intelligence tell us are drug houses or drug shops in the community. We are using our intelligence agencies to go out into these communities to find the information for us so that our Black Scorpion operation team can go back out and execute. And of course, with the assistance of the community, the police stations in each particular community. Our intentions is to close down every single one of them because as we all know, drugs are getting into the hands of our young people, and that is exactly what we're trying to stop. This from getting into the hands of our young people, and which is also fueling the crimes in our communities. We are monitoring and will continue to monitor prolific offenders, persons of interest, take them into custody where we are legally obligated to do so. Those persons who are being electronically monitored, we will continue to monitor them. We are using the resources that we have on hand, our drones, our CCTV, technology. We are using these to our benefit to help prevent crime, but also to help solve those that have already occurred. Our 24-hour saturation patrols continue with Black Strike and our mobile division units. I can tell you that we have increased the number of patrols on our streets. We will continue to find ways to increase those number of patrols in every area of New Providence. And then, of course, we move to Grand Bahama. Once we have already cleared these areas, we know that our urban renewal teams, 14 of which are across New Providence, will remain in these communities to hold the line for us, to work with the people in the community, to gather intelligence if necessary, apart from what our intelligence officers will do, so that we can ensure that the fear of crime is reduced in our communities. The minister said earlier that during the survey, one of the concerns was that of domestic violence. Our domestic violence unit will be in these communities, will go out and continue to lecture. I've seen the reports for last year where many lectures were held across our country, and certainly we will continue those lectures to ensure that we can bring peace to the homes where we are seeing some crimes occur. And so domestic violence section, sexual offenses unit, missing and exploited persons unit, those units will be a part of this operation and will be in the communities once we have cleared them to hold the line for us and to build better communities. And so I thank you, members of the media, members of the public, especially, and of course my officers, especially my officers for the work that they're doing. And there is much to be done. We are up for the challenge, but we cannot do it alone. We need community partnership. We need more people to come on board and help us to build better communities, to create safer communities across the Bahamas. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you to the ministers for those presentations and the police commissioner as well. And as our final speaker, now I'd like to welcome Ms. Desiree Cornet. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She heads the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network, which of course deals with environmental crimes, which, as we know, in some cases enable some of the serious crimes that we face in the country. I'd like to welcome Ms. Cornet so that she can update us on the goals of her program.
Thank you. Thank you kindly. We appreciate time being carved out in this forum to introduce an update about BAWEN, which is the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network. I am Commander Cornet from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, currently attached to the Ministry of National Security to help with the establishment of the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network. So as a steering committee, Bowen has already been leading the charge in environmental law enforcement. We've been ensuring that crimes against our natural resources, against our wildlife, against our environment are taken just as seriously as any other offense. And over the last year and a half, we, along with our regulatory partners and our other law enforcement agencies, we've not only been educating offenders, and that includes an entire gamut of persons, including heavy equipment operators, including excavators, including persons who are in charcoal, the wild bird hunting community. We've been actively educating them on what the laws are that will be enforced. So remember, these are industries that up until now have been under or unregulated. And so we've taken that opportunity to have conversations with them, to share with them what the laws have been. And as of this year, that warnings has stopped. We have now been boots on the ground. We have actively enforcing. We've been issuing warnings, cease and desist orders, and spot fines. And this is a great opportunity for the Bahamian public to understand that in 2024, September 2024, the environmental citations and spot fines were approved. And they are hefty fines. And if I could read just one of them for you, just so you could be aware of what happens for damage to coral reef for those of us involved with anchoring, that's $20,000 spot fine. Commencing project works without the approval of a certificate of environmental clearance, that's $10,000. So these aren't small fines. The thrust behind this is to show that the Bahamas government is responsible, and we are committing, we're showing that we have their full support in executing our mandate. So that can be found online where we find all of our laws. Understand, if you are involved in any of the fields that we mentioned, that spot fines and enforcement actions are underway. And we're going to make it very clear to those who violate our environmental laws that you are held accountable. So as we move forward, it is my belief, and I'm hoping the belief of every well-adjusted, law-abiding citizen of the Bahamas, that Bowen's role is a critical one. Our police and our other security forces have many competing priorities, but we cannot allow environmental crimes to be left unchecked. Protecting our ecosystems is not just about conservation. It's about food security in this country, it's about economic resilience, and it is about national stability. Bowen is intended, like the Minister of National Security said, to be launched as a dedicated enforcement agency, law enforcement agency, a disciplined force, bringing environmental criminals to justice. And the return on investment will be clear: preserving our lands and waters, strengthening tourism, securing our fishing industries, ensuring the natural beauty of the Bahamas remains intact for generations to come. The Minister Martin would have mentioned some of the other environmental crimes, like pollution and derelict vehicles. I want to mention a couple more because a lot of persons with a new agency need to understand what the entire gamut of environmental crimes is. So I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of vessels that we have anchoring in our waters that continue to just pull up our reefs. Our reefs are extremely important, not only for fishery supplies and nurseries, but they actually help with stemming waves during heavy waters. There's a lot of persons involved in mangrove removal without any type of permits. Again, something that helps protect a very, very flat land surface from storms. We have a lot of persons trafficking invasive species into our country who are hobbyists and pet enthusiasts. And right now that's okay, but right now the only thing we have to be afraid of in our country used to be mosquitoes and a couple of foul snakes that just are afraid of us as we are of them. If we don't police these types of items, you're going to have a lot of dangerous species and poisonous and venomous items that are going to come into the country. On the other hand, we also have persons that are trafficking our species, our endemics, out of the country. We have poaching of flamingos. Of course, everybody understands the IUU, the fisheries that happen. We have fishermen that just take what they want from our waters without us getting anything back into the government coffers. And of course, there's hardwood poaching and cascarilla barks. And in every island, there's a plethora of environmental crimes. We are going to be a small team when we start off. So as a matter of fact, right now, as soon as we're finished, we're going to head over to our 2025 National Strategic Planning, Priority Planning workshop with all our regulatory agencies that make sure that we make the greatest impact with a small team. So that was an introduction to some persons and an update for others about the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network, an agency that we intend to make impactful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Cornet, and thank you to all of our presenters. At this time, we will open the floor for questions from members of the media. Please stand and introduce yourself before asking your question. Thank you.
Morning, Travis Carroll from the Nassau Guardian. I have a question for the Commissioner. I wanted to ask about the anti-gang law that was passed last year. I wanted to know if the police have charged anybody in connection with the law. And if not, I guess, what efforts are you using to utilize that piece of legislation? I asked because the Attorney General recently made a comment about it, asking the police to use some of the tools of the government that provide it.
And I want to say thank you to the government for providing the tool for us. We had a discussion this morning in my commander's meeting about that law to see where we are. We are actively investigating our very first case, and the update that I got that I can give now to the public is that we are well on the way and hoping that very shortly we'll be able to put persons before the courts and deem them true gang leaders in our community and put them before the courts. And so I'm pleased with the work. It is not something that can happen within the 48 hours of policing any investigation. It is a long investigation that requires us to go and get proper intelligence on and documentation. And I'm pleased to say that we do have one case that we're investigating, and hopefully we will have that before the courts.
I get to do a follow-up, Commissioner. Could you just speak generally about how the police intends to tackle dismantling these gangs in the community?
One of the good ways, or the ways that we see that our efforts are working, is certainly through the Clear Hold and Build initiative. We are going into each community, and we've started with the Angliston community, and we've seen the results. You've heard about the results this morning. And so we intend to continue to be very aggressive in our approach to crime and those who commit crimes in our communities. I don't want anyone to for a second believe that because a woman is in charge of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, she will allow anything or any crime to go unchecked. My officers are quite competent. I believe that they are brave, bold, and dedicated enough to make sure that everyone in our community feels safe. And so I can tell you that my commands I have already issued commands, and I'm seeing the result of those commands. We will not shrink to anyone's challenges of crime in our community. We will show you that we are the top law enforcement to enforce the laws of the Bahamas, and we're not afraid to do so.
I do want to ask, since you brought it up, have you received pushback because you're a woman?
No, but I don't want anyone to have an idea that they should push back. And so there's been no pushback, but I don't want anyone to get the idea that they can. The organization is strong, and we've been strong from the very beginning, and we will continue to show our strength in these communities.
Jose, from Iris News. Good morning. We're getting reports that the victim in that brutal crime over the weekend was not the intended target. In fact, I'm hearing that the intended target was someone who's out on bail for murder. Any truth to that? I know it's still early in the investigation.
It is very early in the investigation. We've heard that, but we have not confirmed that at this point. When we are able to confirm that that person was not the intended target, and we feel the need to bring that to the community. We will certainly do so, but we are talking with the family to see what information we can get as it relates to him. Again, we have not confirmed that information. Our officers from the homicide section are working this case along with all the other open cases to ensure that we can bring them to quick and speedily close, but that we can get people before the courts for them.
Now, what is prosecution going to look like for those four men seen in the video, given that we see them killing and continuing with the crime, even in the presence of a young child, the man's daughter, and so persons have been outraged, right? I mean, so what could we expect there once those individuals would have been nabbed?
The job of the Royal Bahamas Police Force is to investigate these matters, to find the evidence, to put them before the courts, and I believe in the justice system, and we will, once we put them to the courts, the courts will then dispense justice. We leave that to the courts.
Good morning, Commissioner. Sorry, just before you leave. I'm Berthany McDermott from our news. The minister spoke about a manpower shortage within the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Are you able to speak to the impact that is having on operations, the Clare Holding Bill, or just regular operations throughout New Providence and the Family Islands, considering you may have a significant lack of manpower to be able to properly police the islands?
While there is a lack of manpower in our organization, and our efforts are to recruit very, very shortly, I do believe, and I want to say thanks to the officers who are not looking at the clock. They're not watching the clock when they report for duty. And I find that there are lots of officers, when we call them out, they come. And so this is, while we understand that there is a shortage, while we see that there is a shortage in our manpower, it is not affecting the production or the productivity of the officers of our operations. And I want to say again, I can't thank the officers enough for the contributions that they make to our organization and to the communities.
Are you able to put a number in terms of how many officers you would need to bring the force up to a comfortable complement?
Not at this time, no.
We know that a lot of these killings are happening as a result of retaliation. Just wanted to know if the urban renewal officers are working with the homicide investigators to maybe get ahead of some of these incidents before retaliation happens.
So we have one police force, just one police force, and different arms of the police force are all working in the community. Urban Renewal has its mandate, our intelligence units have their mandate, and we expect that all areas that have a particular mandate will go out, get the information, and work with our organization, fully with the organization, to ensure that these matters do not occur. The goal is to prevent. That is difficult, but we are, again, up to the challenge, and we're going to continue to work until we can get full partnership with the public, members of the public, to help us to prevent these incidents from occurring.
And I have my name from the Tribune. Are you able to give an update in regards to, I think it was sometime last month, a mother would have said that her 10-year-old son was allegedly beaten by police officers, and he would have sustained like wounds on his behind. Are you able to give an update in regards to that investigation?
Unfortunately, at this time, I cannot give an update on it, but in the near future, I would be able to do so.
I have a question for the minister, Monroe. This one? Yes, sir, Minister. So, despite you urging officers to do the right thing, we see another BDOC officer. I think he's going to be all for the courts today for trying to bring drugs into a correctional facility. So you could share your concerns thereof, and given what we see is the trend of officers trying to bring in these kind of prohibited drugs into the correctional facility, does it speak to a high demand that officials are grappling with at the prison from inmates at this time?
Yeah, well, one would expect that if something is being supplied, it's because it's being demanded. The Bahamas Department of Correction and the correctional officers are no different from the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, or any other agencies. We recruit from the public. And so the same foibles that exist in the public may exist on the force. Each of the agencies use different methods in their recruitment exercise to seek to recruit only the best. But even recruiting only the best, you are recruiting human beings. As the commissioner indicated earlier, in her administration, they have moved to ethics training, retraining across all the ranks. And that is to recognize that you're recruiting human beings. And the measure of an organization, in my view, is not whether it has any members that stumble, that breaches the rules, but the measure of that institution is what it does when that happens. And so when you do see the police put before the courts police officers who they say there's reasonable cause to say they've committed an offense, when you see the Department of Corrections, through its internal affairs section and in concert with the police, put correctional officers before the court who they say have breached the laws, that can assure the Bahamian public that the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Bahamas Department of Corrections, have no sacred cows. That if you are found to be in violation, they will call you to account. I've said previously, I would be disturbed if you had not one policeman ever put before the court, not one correctional officer ever put before the court. That might be the surest sign that the organizations aren't holding people accountable. As you move forward, you would aim at the numbers falling, but the public can be assured. And I hasten to say I make no pronouncement on whether the persons are innocent or guilty, because that, as the commissioner says, is for the justice process. But when you see these organizations putting their members before the court, that is accountability. That is the surest sign that they are seeking to hold everyone accountable, regardless of who you are. And so the public can be encouraged that if they have an allegation of wrongdoing, they should feel free to make it, because the fact that these persons end up before the court is the surest testimony to the fact that the police force, corrections, and the defense force hold their members accountable.
I don't know who able to answer, but I think someone would have said there was a survey conducted in the Engliston community for this Claire Hall Build initiative. Is anyone able to give some statistics or findings of the survey conducted?
That is a substantive work that we would prefer to present in a holistic way. In this country, too often, it's what we think. If you listen to the radio, everyone thinks they have the solution for crime. Everyone thinks they know everything about everything. We're trying to be more evidence-based, more factual-based. It is a substantive work that we would intend shortly to release to the press and have a full discussion over it with the researcher present, so that we can interrogate the results of it, so that you can have a full view of here is who was questioned, here are the limitations, here are the questions, and exactly what do you make of the responses. Some of them are very interesting, and we wouldn't want that to get lost in the wash of this general thing, but it's very interesting to see what were the attitudes in the Angliston community when they were surveyed.
Also over the weekend, we see a 19-year-old young boy, man being murdered, and just recently a 17-year-old boy being accused of murder, being charged. I know this crime fighting strategy is in place, but beyond this, what are we doing proactively to address this issue where we see young individuals being swept into a life of crime, and obviously in some instances falling victim to it for whatever reason?
I've had occasion recently, and I've always in discussions with the Honorable Glennis Anna Martin, we appear to go in these cycles of outrage, eh? There was an occasion when a child was killed in an attempt on somebody else's life, when a woman going to prayer meeting was gunned down inadvertently, one would think. And this cycle of indignation and outrage is not in and of itself useful. What is required is a consistent, deliberate approach to the issue. As we have said, these people live amongst us. They are our children. What is necessary is for us to take responsibility. And I yearn for the day when something happens and on these radio talk shows, rather than hearing what the police are doing, aren't doing, what the church isn't doing, aren't doing, for the callers to be saying, this is somebody in my community, here is what I think I should be doing in my community to address it. We have a 15-year-old charge with multiple murders. A 15-year-old. We have a 16-year-old charged with it. These are young people raised by us. And so that I can be very clear, when I was younger, if you had an inept parent, because you had them all through our generations, you had the community that assisted. I have witnessed a young woman having trouble raising the child, and she got in problems, and she's castigated on the talk shows. But what stood out to me is everybody would have seen this young mother having problems and difficulties. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. She doesn't live out in space. She lives in a community. So when you see people having difficulties raising children, exactly what do you do about it? Are we reduced to a society where we take videos of what is happening, that we become voyeurs? That is the real challenge. So this cycle of outrage and indignation, while it may be an excuse for you to say, I don't have to do anything, it doesn't help the situation. A whole of society approach means that every time there's something that gets you outraged, your response should be, what am I going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? When you go around talking about what the police should do, what the government should do, what the church should do, what the school should do, what you are trying to do is absolve yourself from the responsibility of doing something about it yourself. So as a Bahamian, anytime I'm outraged, I have to focus on what I can do. And that's what crime-free looks like me means. Doesn't mean anything really big, you know, if you look at some of it. Some of it is persons with a dance group in church. They're intervening in the life of those young children who they're mentoring. Coach Kevin Johnson, he's working with young men. Andy and Nancy Knowles, quite, you would think just teaching children how to swim, but on the bus ride to the pool, they sing religious songs and learn memory verses. So the challenge with all of these people who are indignant and outraged, what have you done? What have you done in the last week, in the last month, in the last year to make any impact in your community? Because we're not really interested in the voyeurs. We're interested in the people who are doing wrong, because they're who we have to address, and we're interested in the people who are interested in helping. You know, the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And we're supposed to be a Christian nation, correct?
Just a question, I guess you can answer it with the commissioner, but I know that there was speculation that a white Nissan Juke was involved in multiple recent crimes. Is there any truth to that?
From the reports that I get, there appear to be favorite vehicles for this crew of miscreants who do these things in our country. They appear to be Japanese vehicles of various descriptions. and of varying types. I don't think it would be appropriate to disclose necessarily all of the intelligence of the police, because those fellas listen too. And so if they know what the police abilities and capabilities are, they will seek to change to meet them.
Minister, in Parliament last week, you revealed some details into the Metro Solutions, the company that had the ankle monitoring contract that was canceled. One of the shareholders, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering correctly, was Kirkwood Andrews. Are you able to say if that's the current sitting Deputy Commissioner of Police? And if it is there concern about officers holding contracts like this one that kind of deal with law enforcement at the same time?
Well, firstly, the officer didn't hold a contract. A company did.
Right.
There's nothing that prevents a law enforcement officer having shares in a company. So for instance, I would imagine a number of them have shares in Cable Bahamas, First Caribbean Bank, any number of undertakings. I can speak directly, since you raised it, to that question. It was a question that was raised by the former Prime Minister to suggest somehow that my law firm had some dealings with this company. I can say, having looked at the files, that on what is displayed on that matter, the matter was sent out for competitive bidding. It was awarded to Metro. But if anyone knows Leon Bethel, they call him the General. He is the policeman who said he invited all criminals the police were looking for to come to Bay Street for Junkanoo so they could lock them up. That was his nature. It is clear to me, from the view of the files, that the undertaking was the undertaking of Leon Bethel. And that was borne out by the fact that although the contract was awarded to Metro Security Solutions, all of the payments were made directly to Leon Bethel. I know Deputy Commissioner Andrews, if he had an active involvement in a company, he'd make sure it had a bank account, and he'd make sure that the payments went into that bank account, because that's the only way that you can get your benefit out of an undertaking. What we must be concerned about is conflicts of interest. So an example of a conflict of interest is that my predecessor had a security license as Minister of National Security. He signed to renew his own security license every year that he was minister. You can see his signature on his security license. Now that was him giving something to himself. Neither of the deputy commissioners gave anything to themselves. So that's the first level of conflict. And then his company got the security arrangements when Buju Banton, a convicted cocaine trafficker, had a concert here. And I am aware that when convicted individuals seek entry, and no objection from the Ministry of National Security is usually sought. So if the usual practice held true, he would have been asked for no objection. That must have been favorably given, because Buju Banton performed here, and then his security firm ended up with the work. None of the officers you spoke about had anything that approximate to what could be called a conflict of interest. Security work involves law enforcement, and the duty of the officers are law enforcement. If I had a security firm, for instance, I was asked about Vibes Cartel. Wouldn't it be amazing if I gave a no objection to Vibes Cartel and then suddenly my company provided the security for Vibes Cartel? So we have to be sensible and reasonable as to how we approach issues and not just surface level. I don't know if that answers the question.
Are you able to say the business, of the owner of the scrap metal yard on Gladstone Road that caught the fire on Friday, were they fined? I know you guys were speaking about like environmental stuff, did they receive any fine?
No, that, I can't speak to that directly. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again to all of our presenters, and thank you, members of the press and other stakeholders present for attending today. With that, we bring our press briefing to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great morning.